Hi all! In the second video we'll look at 3 more techniques from the manual of Fiore de Liberi. We will analyze the techniques from the pedagogical point of view. I will show you the principles I think the master wants us to learn from the exercises. Fiore tells us that every technique begins from the position of the crowned master we first meet in the sequence. So, we are speaking about the first master of the dagger. We know that the position from which every technique must start is the one we see at the beginning of the section. So, for the first master is the one I showed you in my first video, and is this one. Just to remember you what I've done in the past video, this is a small clip. From this exercise we can move to the other technique. For the moment, let's forget about the striking. We will follow the path of the manual without adding something else in the beginning. We will add other variations further. So now we have the second techniques of the first master. Now we have the second technique of the manual, the one that ends with a middle bind. In this technique, Fiore teaches us how to respond to an action of our opponent, how to respond to a stimulus that our opponent gives us when we touch his arm. Now try to figure in your mind how the action evolves. First of all, we have an opponent that is attacking, and I'm going to block his arm with the position of the first master. And I try to make the first disarm. When my opponent feels my hand on his arm, he tries to retreat his arm. I think this is a natural reaction. If we unpack the sequence and make some little frames, we can have an exercise. First there is an attack. Then I go with a little step out of the way to block the arm of my opponent. At this point I try the disarm, and my opponent reacts. When he does so, I go forward and end up in a middle bind. I think this is the exercise that Fiore wants us to learn, to practice what the German calls Fühlen. As we train with swords in the bind, we can use this sequence to begin training the same thing but applied to the dagger. Now, following the manual, and having in mind the idea of learning how to manage an opponent that is reacting to our actions, we have the third technique. At this point, we know how to block a first intention attack and to execute a first disarm. Then we learn to manage the first natural reaction of an opponent. Now we have a second reaction to manage. An opponent that is closing his arm when he feels touched. And Fiore teaches us how to respond to this with another disarm, a bind, and he says that we can even throw our opponent on his back, lifting his leg. As before, we can unpack it and have some frames to make an exercise. The sequence we can have is the same. We have the attack, the first reaction with the first master, trying the disarm, and now I have to feel again what my opponent is doing. For this exercise, he will just close his arm to follow the sequence. If we are training the feeling of the arms, you can make an exercise where your opponent can have different responses to your action. He can retreat his arm or he can close, and you have to learn to respond correctly to the action. At this point we have to manage a third reaction that an opponent can have when we block his attack. And we see it with the fourth technique of the first master. There are a lot of things an opponent can do when he feels blocked. He can retreat his arm, he can close the arm on his chest. And then we have the third reaction, that is pressing forward, trying to hit the opponent on the flank. I saw this happening a lot of time when people do dagger sparring. You see it happening when the two are fighting and each one has blocked the arm of the opponent and they are trying to overcome the other and pressing, try to hit. If we go for the fourth play of the first master section, Fiore teaches us how to solve this problem. We can use the same way of thinking the exercise. So unpack it and make some little frames again. Just change the stimulus. When you feel that he's going forward, you have to strengthen your arm, make the dagger pass on your side and then go forward and lock him with your right arm. Just be sure that the dagger of your opponent is far from your flank. You can do this by controlling his wrist, putting it well on the side and holding it tight. With this you can make your opponent fall on his back and, as Fiore says, do whatever you want. So now we can build up a complex exercise where the opponent have to simulate different reactions. He can retreat, he can close, or he can press. This is the reason, I think, why Fiore puts every technique in a sequence to make the scholar learn the correct principles that he will find in the other sections. I will surely make a video comparing those actions with the ones you see in the sword section. Now we can come back to the point where we begin the technique. As I said in my first video, I think that we have to use both our hands. There is no reason to have a free hand and just execute techniques with left hand and having the right somewhere in the space. You can even practice those techniques adding the striking with your right fist. And of course it is an exercise. Things are built to happen. As you see here, Nicola attacks, I parry, I strike with my fist, and Nicola knows it, so he can parry my response, and then he executes the reaction, and I execute my technique. If you want to know more about the second play, you can see the video I made with my friend Federico Malagutti. You can find the link down here in the description of the video. And I hope this video will help you in some way. And as always, comments are always welcome. And see you.